This is the Osmo Pocket with two sets of filters, a cheap one that goes for $11.99 and a more expensive one that goes for $50.99. ND filters are like sunglasses for your lens. They filter the amount of light reaching the camera sensor, therefore allowing you to have a higher aperture for a longer amount of time. An MCUV multi-coated ultraviolet filter reduces light glare. CPL filters darken and remove reflections, and ND filters remove the amount of light entering the camera. These filters help you get correct exposure, meaning your combination of settings between aperture, shutter speed and ISO are balanced correctly. When nothing is too bright or lost in the shadows, it means you have achieved perfect exposure.
Hello YouTube, and today, as you saw in that introduction, we're going to be looking at, do cheap filters work better than something more expensive like these PolarPro filters, which go for roughly about $60, or these $11.99 filters that I picked up on AliExpress. As you can see, the cheaper version, and this is the PolarPro Cinematic Series, comes up to ND16. They are polarized, and generally you can use these in the middle of the day. I think you need ND32. But have a look at these tests, and once again, if you like my videos, subscribing really helps my channel.
He's the how-to guy. Subscribe.
Now I should probably mention that the Osmo Pocket has a fixed aperture, which means we cannot use the aperture to change what our picture looks like. We have to use ND filters or the shutter speed to let in more light or darken the image to get correct exposure. Okay, so this is my split screen. I've got PolarPro on the left, ND16 and a SunnyLife ND32 on the right. Now I only had a PolarPro up to the ND16. If we look at the SunnyLife, it does quite a good job considering the cost of these filters, under 12 bucks, but a little bit dark and probably not what it was on that day. PolarPro ND16 does quite a good job. I think I had to push my shutter speed up to 160 to get the shot. So this is no filter auto exposure using the Osmo Pocket. You can see the shutter speed is 1/2500 at the bottom, which is not ideal. It's not double your frame rate. Remember, we'd like to keep the rule of 180 degrees, which tries to keep our shutter speed set to double the frame rate. So if we're shooting 24 frames per second, we'd ideally want it to be 1/48 shutter speed or as close as possible. So when we have no filter on and we go to manual, it overexposes everything, so you've got to try and add a filter on. So this is an ND8 SunnyLife cheap filter, and you still need to go and try and set your shutter speed. Let's put an ND16 on and see if we can get closer. So we'd ideally like to get our exposure value down to 0. You can see it's plus 1.7 at the moment. Where that light bulb is, we want that value down to 0. So we either have to adjust our shutter speed or add more ND filters. So now we put an ND32 on, the cheaper filter, and we're checking the ISO. ISO you'd like to keep at 100. Let's see what shutter speed we need to get that EV value down to 0. So close enough, we got it to 1/100, which is not ideal. It's not double our frame rate, but using the cheap filter. So the PolarPro doing the same test, ND16, keep my ISO at 100, and let's see what we can do. I think 160 was what I filmed this test in to get it close to 0. It was too dark at 1/200. That's 160 shutter speed, ND PolarPro ND16. So it's as close to good exposure as I could get. Another test using the PolarPro, you can see the zebra stripes tell us we're overexposed. How much do we have to adjust? 1/160 gets rid of that, and this is a better shot. PolarPro ND16 shutter 1/160. This was using the cheaper SunnyLife ND32 filter. I was able to get it down to 1/120, and then I decided to brighten the image up again, and I ended up filming 1/120, and then 1/100, brightened it up a little bit, but it was a little overexposed. This is a walking test. the ND16 PolarPro 1/160, the SunnyLife I had a 32 ND filter and only had to go 1/100. This is a comparison between the two. I think the PolarPro looks a little better, the SunnyLife looks a little brighter. Again, the PolarPro, and a little bit of a walk test. There is no motion blur in this image, but it still came out quite nicely. Another issue I was having was while the PolarPro ND filters were on, face tracking did not seem to want to work. I tried at different positions, and what I ended up doing was actually, you can see I'm trying to hunt, it just was really slag and slow and didn't want to work properly. What I eventually ended up doing was turning off manual exposure. This was auto exposure using the ND filter, and it worked a lot better, the face tracking. And eventually I took the filter off altogether. No ND filter, and the tracker worked even better. So I don't know if there's an issue. So guys, hopefully you found that interesting. If you enjoy this kind of thing, watch some of my other videos. They're kinda similar. We do drones, action cameras, and different kinds of photography, cinematic stuff. So have a look and leave some comments if you have any questions. Thanks a lot.